The exploration ship New Horizon moved slowly through the dark space toward the yellow planet below. Inside the ship's main control room, 4 crew members stood looking at the large screen showing their destination. The planet looked like a giant ball of sand with 2 bright suns shining on it. Captain Zethkar was the first to speak. His blue skin was always wet, and small gills on his neck moved as he breathed. He came from a water world where his people, the Aquari, lived in oceans and rivers. "The planet looks dry," he said in his deep voice. "But our mission is simple. We go down, take samples of the rocks, and come back up in 3 days." Chief Science Officer Vexton clicked his sharp mandibles together. He was tall and thin with green skin that looked like armor. His insect-like eyes moved in different directions as he studied the planet data. The Mentari people were known for being very smart and careful. "The mineral readings are good," he said. "The rare metals we need are deep under the surface. But the temperature will be very hot." Security Chief Quindle stood silent for a moment. Her body was made of living crystal that changed colors as she thought. "The Lithani people were strong and could live in many different places. My scans show no dangerous life forms," she said. Her voice sounded like wind through rocks. "We should have no problems with the mission." Jake Murphy, the human engineer, listened to his alien crewmates talk. He was shorter than all of them and looked weak compared to their strong bodies. His brown hair was messy, and his clothes were simple work clothes. The other crew members often forgot he was there. "What? About water?" he asked quietly. Captain Zethkar looked at Jake with surprise. "Water? We have enough water for 5 days. The mission is only 3 days? Why do you worry about water, human?" Jake looked at the planet on the screen. He had grown up on Earth's desert colonies where water was always hard to find. His grandfather had taught him how desert people lived before they had machines to make water. "The planet has 2 suns," Jake said. "That means it will be very hot. Hot places make you lose water fast." Vexton made a sound like laughing. "Human, your species always worries about small things. Our technology is much better than yours. We have water makers, air cleaners, and cooling systems. Your people still use old ways to survive." Quindle's crystal body turned a bright blue, which meant she was amused. "The human is afraid of a little heat. On my world, we live in places much hotter than this planet." Jake said nothing more. He knew the aliens thought humans were weak. Most of the galaxy believed humans were the newest and most fragile species in space. Other races had been traveling between stars for thousands of years while humans had only been in space for a few hundred years. The ship's computer made a soft sound. "We are ready to land," it announced. "All crew members should prepare for ground mission." The 4 crew members went to the equipment room to get their gear. Each alien had special suits made for their species. Captain Zethkar wore a suit that kept his skin wet and cool. Vexton had armor that protected his thin body and kept his internal temperature steady. Quindle's suit was made of metal that would not break under pressure. Jake put on his simple human suit. It was basic compared to the alien equipment, but it worked well enough. He also took extra water bottles that the other crew members did not think they needed. They loaded their equipment into the small shuttle that would take them to the planet's surface. The aliens brought many electronic tools for testing rocks and measuring things. Jake brought his basic toolkit and some materials he thought might be useful. As the shuttle flew down to the planet, Jake looked out the window. The surface was covered in red and yellow sand that moved in the wind. Rocky hills rose up from the desert floor, and he could see no signs of water anywhere. The 2 suns in the sky made everything look bright and harsh. "Landing zone is 2 kilometers from the main mineral deposits," Vexton announced. "We will set up base camp and begin work immediately." The shuttle landed with a soft bump on the sandy ground. When the door opened, a wave of hot air hit them like a wall. The temperature was much higher than their instruments had predicted. Jake felt the heat try to pull moisture from his skin immediately. Captain Zethkar stepped out first, but quickly stepped back. "The heat is more than expected," he said. His skin was already starting to look dry around the edges. They set up their base camp near the shuttle. The aliens' equipment worked well at first, creating a cool area with clean air and plenty of water. Jake helped them set up the machines, but he also looked around the desert with careful eyes. While the aliens focused on their electronic equipment, Jake studied the land. He saw signs that most people would miss. The way the sand was shaped showed where wind came from. The color of rocks told him about water that might be underground. Small plants grew in certain places, which meant they found water somehow. "The first day of work is complete," Vexen announced as the two suns began to set. "We have collected good samples and mapped the mineral deposits. Tomorrow we will dig deeper." That night, Jake lay in his sleeping bag and listened to the wind. It made strange sounds as it blew through the rocks. The temperature dropped quickly when the suns went down, and he noticed that the air felt different. There was moisture in it, but not very much. The aliens slept peacefully, trusting their machines to keep them safe and comfortable. They had no idea that the planet was more dangerous than they thought. Jake stayed awake longer, watching and listening. His grandfather had taught him that the desert was always changing, and a smart person never stopped watching for danger. During the night, the wind grew stronger. Jake heard sand hitting the shuttle and their equipment. By morning, he knew they would have problems. The aliens' machines were not made for desert conditions. They worked well in space and on planets with normal weather, but deserts were different. When the two suns rose, the temperature climbed quickly. The aliens' cooling systems had to work harder to keep their base camp comfortable. Jake noticed that their water makers were using more power than planned. The machines were not as efficient in the dry desert air. "We need to work faster, Captain," Zethkar said. His skin looked less wet than the day before. "The heat is affecting our equipment." Vexen checked his instruments. "The temperature is 10 degrees higher than predicted. Our cooling systems are working at full power." Jake looked at the sky. Clouds were forming in the distance, but they were not rain clouds. They were dust clouds, which meant a big storm was coming. "We should prepare for bad weather," he said. The aliens looked at him with annoyance. "Human, our weather sensors show clear skies," Quendel said. Her crystal body was starting to look cloudy instead of clear, but Jake was right. As the morning went on, the wind grew stronger and the dust clouds came closer. The aliens' sensitive equipment began to have problems. Their computers could not work properly in the blowing sand, and their communication with the ship became weak. By noon, they faced their first real crisis. The desert was about to test them in ways they had never imagined, and their advanced technology might not be enough to save them. The dust storm hit them like a wall of angry sand. Jake had seen it coming for hours, but the aliens trusted their weather computers more than human eyes. Now they were paying the price for that mistake. The wind screamed around their base camp, carrying millions of tiny sand particles that cut through the air like tiny knives. The aliens' equipment, which had worked perfectly in the controlled environment of their spaceship, began to fail one by one. Captain Zethkar tried to call their ship, but the radio made only crackling sounds. His blue skin was getting drier by the hour, and he kept touching his neck gills nervously. "The communication system is not working," he said, his voice tight with worry. Vexen's insect eyes moved quickly as he checked his instruments. Sand had gotten into the delicate electronic parts, and several screens showed error messages. "The storm is blocking our signals," he said. "The electromagnetic interference is too strong." Jake pulled his simple cloth over his face and moved carefully through the blowing sand. He had learned this trick from his grandfather, who had lived through many desert storms. The aliens watched him with confusion as he seemed to move easily through conditions that were destroying their equipment. "How does he do that?" Quendel asked. Her crystal body was getting small cracks from the sand hitting it over and over. The Lithani people were strong, but they had never faced anything like this constant sandstorm. The storm lasted for 6 hours. When it finally stopped, the aliens looked around their camp with shock. Sand covered everything, and many of their machines were damaged. The water recycling system that kept their camp supplied with fresh water was making strange noises. Jake brushed sand off his equipment and started checking for damage. His simple tools were dirty but still worked. The Aliens' advanced machines were having serious problems. The water maker is broken, Vexton announced after checking the main system. Sand got into the filters and the pump. We cannot fix it without replacement parts. Captain Zethkar looked at their remaining water supplies. They had brought enough water for 5 days, but that was when they expected their machines to make more water from the air. Now they only had the bottles they carried, and those would not last long in the desert heat. How much water do we have left? He asked. Quindle counted the bottles. Enough for 2 days, maybe 3 if we are very careful. Jake looked at the broken water machine. He had worked on similar systems before, but this one was damaged too badly to repair. Can we call for help? He asked. Vexton shook his head. The communication system is also damaged. Even if we fix it, the storm may have damaged our ship's receivers. The second day began with more problems. The 2 suns rose higher and hotter than before, and the aliens began to suffer from the heat. Captain Zethkar's skin was becoming rough and dry. His gills were closing up to save water, but this made it harder for him to breathe. Vexton's green exoskeleton started to crack along the edges. The Mentari people needed moisture to keep their shell-like skin flexible. Without enough water, his body was becoming brittle and painful to move. Quindle's crystal body was getting cloudy and developing stress fractures. The Lithani people stored water inside their crystal structure, but the desert heat was making it evaporate faster than they could replace it. Jake watched his alien companions get weaker while he managed his own water carefully. He had learned water discipline from living in Earth's desert colonies. He knew how to make small amounts of water last longer and how to avoid wasting moisture through breathing and sweating. We need to find water, Captain Zethkar said. His voice was getting rough from his dry throat. There is no water on this planet, Vexton replied. Our scanners showed this before we landed? Jake looked around the desert landscape. The aliens saw only empty sand and rock, but he saw signs that told a different story. He noticed the way certain rocks were stained, showing where water had flowed in the past. Some plants grew in specific places, which meant they found water somewhere underground. Your scanners might be wrong, Jake said quietly. The aliens looked at him with irritation. Human, our instruments are more accurate than your eyes, Quindle said. Her voice was becoming harder to understand as her crystal structure changed shape, but Jake kept looking. He walked around their camp area, studying the ground and the rocks. He found small signs that the aliens' machines had missed. Animal tracks that were old but showed where creatures had once gone to drink water. Plants that grew in lines, following underground water sources. By the afternoon of the second day, the aliens were in serious trouble. Captain Zethkar could barely stand up. His blue skin was now gray and flaking off in pieces. He tried to drink water, but his body was so dry that it could not process the liquid properly. Vexton's exoskeleton was cracking more each hour. Pieces of his shell-like skin were falling off, and he moved very slowly to avoid more damage. His insect eyes were getting cloudy, making it hard for him to see clearly. Quindle's crystal body was full of fractures that spread like spider webs. Her voice was now just a whisper, and her color-changing ability was failing. She could no longer communicate properly with her fellow Lithani people. Jake knew they were dying. The aliens' advanced technology had failed them completely, and their bodies were not designed for desert survival. He had to act fast or watch his crewmates die from dehydration. That night, Jake made a decision. While the aliens rested fitfully, he began to work on a project they would think was impossible. He started building a water trap using pieces of their damaged equipment and materials from their shuttle. He worked quietly in the darkness, using only a small light to see. The aliens were too weak to notice what he was doing. Jake took metal sheets from their broken machines and emergency blankets from their survival kits. He found plastic tubes and collection containers that he could use. Jake's grandfather had taught him about solar water traps when he was young. The idea was simple, but effective. During the cool desert night, moisture in the air would condense on cold surfaces. During the hot day, heated air would create currents that could be used to collect more water. As he worked, Jake thought about his alien crewmates. They had always treated him like he was weak and stupid. They believed their technology made them superior to humans. But now their machines were broken and only old human knowledge could save them. The night air was cooler and carried more moisture than during the day. Jake could feel the difference, even though his instruments showed the humidity was still very low. He positioned his water trap to catch the slight breeze that came from the east, where he had seen signs of ancient water sources by dawn. Jake had built a simple but effective water collection system. It looked crude compared to the aliens' sophisticated equipment, but it was designed to work with the desert's natural patterns instead of fighting against them. As the two suns rose and began to heat the air, Jake's trap started to work. Small drops of water began to form on the metal surfaces and drip into his collection containers. It was not much, but it was hope. The aliens woke up weaker than before. They looked at Jake's contraption with confusion and disbelief. How could such a simple device work when their advanced technology had failed? But as the morning progressed, they could see water actually collecting in Jake's containers. For the first time since landing on the desert planet, the aliens began to realize that the human they had dismissed might be their only hope for survival. The sun climbed higher in the sky and Jake's water trap began to work better. Small drops of water gathered on the metal surfaces and rolled down into his collection containers. The aliens watched in amazement as the simple device actually produced water from the dry desert air. Captain Zethkar crawled closer to look at the contraption. His blue skin was now completely gray, and his gills were sealed shut to save moisture. "How is this possible?" he whispered. "Our instruments show the air has almost no water in it." Jake knelt beside his water trap and adjusted one of the metal sheets. "There is always some water in the air," he explained, "even in the driest places. The trick is knowing how to get it out." Vexen's cracked exoskeleton made clicking sounds as he moved. Several pieces of his shell had fallen off during the night, leaving pink skin exposed to the harsh air. "This is just a few drops," he said. "It cannot save us." But Jake was not finished. He had spent the night building more than just one water trap. As the morning progressed, he showed the aliens additional parts of his system. He had created a network of collection surfaces that worked together to gather moisture from different sources. "The metal gets cold at night," Jake explained as he pointed to different parts of his setup. "Cold metal makes water drops form from the air. Then when the sun heats everything up, the warm air moves around and brings more moisture to the cold spots." Quendol's crystal body was now so cracked that she could barely move. Her voice was just a whisper, but she tried to understand what Jake was doing. "Your device uses temperature differences?" "Yes," Jake said. "My grandfather taught me that the desert has its own rhythms. Hot and cold, dry and wet, wind and calm. If you work with these rhythms instead of fighting them, you can find water even in the driest places." The aliens had always relied on their technology to solve problems. They had machines that could create water from chemicals, extract moisture from air using electricity, and purify any liquid they found. But all of those machines needed power and replacement parts. Jake's system needed only the sun and the natural temperature changes of the desert. As the day grew hotter, Jake's water trap produced more water. The heat from the two suns created air currents that moved moisture through his collection system. The aliens watched in wonder as the trickle of water became a steady drip, then a small stream. "This is impossible," Vexen said. "Our science says there is not enough water vapor in this air to collect." Jake smiled for the first time since they had landed. "Your science is right about how much water is in the air, but it is wrong about how to get it out. Sometimes the old ways work better than the new ways." He showed them how he had used pieces of their broken equipment in new ways. The thermal blankets from their emergency kits became condensation surfaces. The plastic tubes from their damaged life support system became water channels. Even the metal plates from their shuttle's hull became collection surfaces. "You are using our equipment," Captain Zethkar observed, "but not the way it was designed to be used." "That is right," Jake said. Your equipment was designed for perfect conditions in space, but we are not in space. We are in a desert, and the desert has different rules. By midday, Jake had collected enough water to give each alien a small drink. It was not much, but it was enough to keep them alive for another day. Captain Zethkar's gills began to open slightly after he drank. Vexen's exoskeleton stopped cracking quite so badly. Quindle's crystal body became a little clearer, but Jake was not satisfied with just collecting water from the air. He had been studying the desert around their camp, and he had noticed things that the aliens' instruments had missed. There were signs of water that existed long before their advanced scanners were invented. "I need to explore the area," Jake told the aliens. "There might be more water sources nearby." The aliens looked at him with fear. "It is too dangerous," Captain Zethkar sighed. "The heat will kill you before you find anything." Jake had already thought about this problem. He had torn pieces of cloth from their supplies and soaked them in water from his trap. He wrapped the wet cloth around his head and neck, creating a cooling system that would help him survive in the heat. "My people have been walking in deserts for thousands of years," Jake said. "We learned how to do it before we had machines to help us." He left the aliens at their camp and walked out into the desert. The sun was brutal, but Jake moved carefully from shadow to shadow, using rocks and hills to protect himself from the dark sunlight. He had learned this technique from his grandfather, who had learned it from his grandfather before him. Jake looked for signs that most people would never notice. He found rocks that were stained with mineral deposits showing where water had flowed in the past. He saw plants that grew in straight lines, following underground water sources. He noticed how the sand was shaped differently in some places, suggesting that water had carved channels beneath the surface. After walking for 2 hours, Jake found what he was looking for. In a small valley between two hills, he discovered an area where the sand was darker and more compact. When he dug down with his hands, the sand became damp after just a few inches. "Underground water," he said to himself. "Just like grandfather taught me." Jake marked the spot with a piece of cloth and returned to the camp. The aliens were worse when he got back, but his water trap had continued to work while he was gone. There was enough water collected to give everyone another small drink. "I found water underground," Jake announced. The aliens looked at him with disbelief. "Our deep scanners found no water sources," Vexen said. "Your scanners look for big lakes and rivers," Jake replied. "But desert water is different. It hides in small pockets and thin layers. It moves slowly through sand and rock. Your machines cannot see it, but people who know how to look can find it." Jake began to plan their next move. He would need to dig a well to reach the underground water, but they had no proper digging tools. He would have to be creative with what they had available. That evening, as the temperature began to drop, Jake worked on improving his water trap system. He added more collection surfaces and created better channels for the water to flow through. The aliens watched him work with growing respect. "How do you know so much about water?" Quindle asked. Her voice was stronger after drinking from Jake's trap. "On Earth, humans lived in deserts for many generations before we had technology," Jake explained. "We had to learn how to find water, or we would die. That knowledge was passed down from parents to children for thousands of years." Captain Zethkar looked at the water dripping steadily into Jake's containers. "We thought technology made us superior to primitive knowledge." "Technology is good," Jake said, "but it is not always the answer. Sometimes the old ways work better because they use nature's own power instead of fighting against it." As night fell, Jake prepared to dig their well the next morning. He had no machines to help him, but he had something more valuable. He had the knowledge of countless generations of humans who had survived in places where survival seemed impossible. The aliens began to understand that they had underestimated the human. His supposed weakness was actually a strength that might save all their lives. The fourth day began with hope. Jake's water trap had worked through the night, collecting enough water to give each alien a proper drink for the first time since their equipment failed. Captain Zethkar's skin was starting to return to its normal blue color, and his gills were working again. But Jake knew they needed more than just the water from his trap. They needed to find the underground water source he had discovered, and they needed to dig a well to reach it. The problem was that they had no proper digging tools, only the basic equipment from their shuttle. "We need to work together," Jake told the aliens. "I can show you how to dig for water, but I need your help to do it." Vexton's exoskeleton was healing slowly, but he was still weak. "What do you need us to do?" Jake had spent the night thinking about this problem. He had remembered stories his grandfather told about how desert people dug wells using simple tools. "We need to make digging tools from what we have here. Then we work in shifts so nobody gets too tired." The aliens looked at their remaining equipment. Most of it was broken or designed for delicate scientific work, not heavy digging. But Jake saw possibilities where they saw only problems. He took metal pieces from their damaged scanner and showed them how to bend and shape them into crude shovels. He used strong plastic from their equipment cases to make handles. The tools looked rough, but they would work for digging in sand and soft rock. "This is very primitive," Quindle said. Her crystal body was getting clearer as she recovered from dehydration. "Primitive but effective," Jake replied. "Sometimes simple tools work better than complex ones." Jake led them to the spot where he had found damp sand. The aliens were amazed when he showed them how to read the signs that indicated water below. He pointed out how the sand was darker and more compact, how certain plants grew in patterns that followed underground water, and how the ground felt different under their feet. "Your instruments cannot see this," Jake explained, "but your hands and eyes can learn to feel it." They began to dig. Jake showed them how to dig a well properly, starting with a wide circle and then going deeper in stages. He taught them to save their energy by working in a steady rhythm instead of trying to dig fast. The work was hard. The aliens had never done physical labor like this before. Their technology usually did all the heavy work for them. But as they dug, they began to understand something important about human survival. "Humans do this kind of work often?" Captain Zefkar asked as he scraped sand with his makeshift shovel. "For thousands of years," Jake answered. "Before we had machines, everything had to be done by hand. We learned to work together and use our bodies and minds to solve problems." After 3 hours of digging, they reached wet sand. Jake showed them how to dig more carefully now, creating a small pool where water could collect. Soon, clean water began to seep into their well from the underground source. The aliens stared in amazement as the water level slowly rose. "It actually works," Vexton said. "We found water using no technology at all." But Jake was not finished teaching them. While they rested from digging, he showed them other desert survival techniques that his people had developed over centuries. He found plants that stored water in their thick leaves and showed the aliens how to extract the moisture safely. He demonstrated how to create shade using their emergency blankets and pieces of metal, making cool areas where they could rest during the hottest part of the day. "These plants have water inside them?" Quindle asked as Jake squeezed liquid from a thick succulent. "Desert plants are experts at finding and storing water," Jake explained. "They have been doing it much longer than any of our machines have existed." Jake also taught them how to build better shelters using natural materials. He showed them how to stack rocks to create walls that would protect them from wind and sand. He demonstrated how to position their shelter so the morning sun would warm them, but the afternoon sun would not overheat them. The aliens worked alongside Jake, learning skills that their advanced civilizations had forgotten. They began to understand that survival was not just about having the right technology, but about understanding how to work with the natural world. Captain Zethkar wiped sweat from his forehead as they finished building a rock shelter. "My people have not done work like this for thousands of years. We have machines to build everything for us." "Machines are good," Jake said, "but they can break. Knowledge and skills cannot break. They stay with you forever." As the day progressed, their situation improved dramatically. The well provided clean water for drinking and cooking. The plants Jake found gave them additional moisture and even some nutrition. The shelters protected them from the worst of the desert heat, But most importantly, the aliens were learning to see the desert differently. Instead of a hostile environment that their technology could not handle, they began to understand it as a place with its own patterns and resources. Vexton used his scientific training to study the techniques Jake was teaching them. The efficiency of these methods is remarkable, he said. They use very little energy but produce good results. That is because they work with nature instead of against it, Jake replied. Desert people learned that fighting the desert is a losing battle. But if you understand the desert and work with it, you can survive and even thrive. Jake showed them how to predict weather changes by watching the sky and feeling the wind. He taught them to identify which rocks would provide the best shelter and which areas would be cooler during the hot afternoon hours. The aliens began to see patterns they had never noticed before. They started to understand why Jake had been able to predict the sandstorm when their instruments had failed. He was reading natural signs that their technology could not detect. You see things that our sensors cannot measure, Quindel observed. Sensors are good for measuring exact numbers, Jake said. But survival is about understanding relationships and patterns. That takes experience and wisdom, not just technology. As evening approached, Jake worked on expanding their water collection system. He built more solar stills and improved the condensation traps. He showed the aliens how to maintain the systems and make repairs using available materials. The aliens helped eagerly, no longer thinking of the work as beneath them. They were beginning to understand that these skills were not primitive at all, but represented thousands of years of human learning and adaptation. We have learned more about survival in 3 days than in all our years of education, Captain, Zethkar admitted. That night they had enough water to drink freely for the first time since landing. They had food from the plants Jake had found and shelter from the desert wind. Most importantly, they had gained knowledge that would help them survive even if their technology failed again. Jake looked at his alien companions as they worked together to prepare their evening meal. They were no longer the helpless, technology-dependent beings who had landed on this planet. They were becoming survivors, learning to adapt and overcome challenges using intelligence and cooperation. Tomorrow we will try to fix the communication system, Jake said. But even if we cannot call for help, we can survive here as long as we need to. The aliens nodded in agreement. They had learned that survival was not about having the best technology, but about having the knowledge and skills to work with whatever resources were available. And they had learned that humans possessed those skills in abundance. The 5th day started with clear skies and hope. Jake woke up early and checked their water systems. The well was producing steady water, and his solar traps had collected more moisture during the cool night. For the first time since landing, they had enough water for everyone. The aliens were different now. Captain Zethkar moved with confidence as he helped maintain their shelter. His blue skin was healthy again, and he no longer looked afraid of the desert heat. Vexton was using his scientific mind to improve the water collection systems, making them more efficient. Quindle's crystal body was clear and strong, and she was learning to read the desert signs that Jake had taught them. Today we try to call for help, Jake announced as they shared breakfast. The food came from desert plants he had shown them how to find and prepare safely, but Jake had been thinking about their communication problem all night. The aliens' radio equipment was damaged by sand, but he had an idea that might work. He had noticed that their shuttle still had some working parts, including the navigation system and emergency beacon. We cannot fix the main radio, Vexton said as they examined the damaged equipment. The sand destroyed too many delicate parts. Jake looked at the various pieces of equipment scattered around their camp. Maybe we do not need to fix the radio. Maybe we can build a new one using parts from different machines. The aliens looked at him with surprise. Build a radio from broken parts? Why not? Jake said. We built water collectors from broken parts. We built digging tools from broken parts. We can build a communication device the same way. Jake began to sort through their equipment, looking for parts that might still work. He found power cells from their scientific instruments, signal amplifiers from their computer systems, and antenna components from their navigation equipment. The aliens watched as Jake laid out the parts and began to connect them in ways that were not in any instruction manual. He was creating something new from the pieces of their old technology. "This should not work," Vexton said as he watched Jake wire components together. "These parts were not designed to work together." "Many things should not work," Jake replied. "But they do if you understand how they really function instead of just how they are supposed to function." Jake worked for 3 hours, connecting circuits and testing signals. The aliens helped by holding components and following his instructions, even when they did not understand what he was trying to do. Finally, Jake connected the power source and turned on his improvised communication device. Static filled the air, but underneath the noise, they could hear something else. It was the signal from their ship in orbit. "New Horizon, this is the ground team," Jake spoke into the makeshift microphone. "Do you hear us?" The response was weak and full of static, but they could make out words. "Ground team, we have been trying to reach you for 3 days. What is your status?" Captain Zethkar took the microphone from Jake. "We are alive and well. Request pickup at our landing coordinates." The ship's communication officer sounded surprised. "Alive and well? Our instruments showed your equipment failing. We thought you might be in serious danger." "We were," Captain Zethkar replied, looking at Jake with respect. "But our human engineer saved us using techniques we had never seen." Within 2 hours, a rescue shuttle arrived from the New Horizon. The pilot and rescue team expected to find a desperate crew barely surviving in the harsh desert. Instead, they found a well-organized camp with working water systems, comfortable shelters, and 4 healthy crew members. Commander Drake, the ship's second officer, stepped out of the rescue shuttle and looked around in amazement. "What is all this?" he asked, pointing to the water traps and well system. "This is how humans survive," Jake said simply. The rescue team spent an hour examining Jake's water collection systems and learning about the techniques he had used. They were amazed that such simple methods could work so effectively in conditions that had defeated advanced alien technology. "We need to document all of this," Commander Drake said. "The Galactic Exploration Council should know about these techniques." As they packed their equipment to leave, the aliens made sure to carefully preserve Jake's water systems and take detailed notes about everything he had taught them. They wanted to remember every lesson they had learned. Captain Zethkar stood beside the well they had dug together. "This experience has changed how I think about survival and technology," he said. "We always believed that more advanced technology was better, but now I understand that wisdom and adaptability are more important." Vexton was still studying the water trap design. These methods use basic physics and natural processes. They are actually more sophisticated than our machines because they work with environmental systems instead of trying to control them. Quindle looked out at the desert that had nearly killed them. "I am not afraid of this place anymore. Now I understand it." When they returned to the New Horizon, word of their survival spread quickly through the ship. Everyone wanted to hear the story of how the human engineer had saved the crew using primitive techniques. Jake found himself giving presentations to other crew members about desert survival methods. He taught them about reading natural signs, finding water sources, and building shelters using available materials. The aliens listened with great interest, taking notes and asking questions. "Why do humans know these things when other species do not?" asked Lieutenant Kess, one of the ship's officers. "Because we had to learn them to survive," Jake explained. "My species spent thousands of years living in harsh environments without advanced technology. We learned to adapt or we died. That knowledge was passed down through generations." "Captain." Zethkar filed a detailed report about their mission that praised Jake's actions and recommended changes to standard exploration procedures. He suggested that all mixed-species crews should include survival training based on human techniques. "The human demonstrated abilities that our technology cannot replicate," he wrote. "His knowledge of natural systems and adaptive problem-solving saved our lives when our advanced equipment failed." The report also recommended that Jake be promoted to senior survival specialist. a new position created specifically to recognize his unique skills. The Galactic Exploration Council approved the promotion and asked Jake to develop training programs for other exploration teams. Commander Drake called Jake to his office a week after their return. You have been selected to train mixed species crews in adaptive survival techniques, he said. The council believes your knowledge could prevent future disasters. Jake accepted the assignment, but he had one request. I want to return to that desert planet, he said. There is still much to learn there about how humans and aliens can work together. 6 months later, Jake returned to the desert planet leading a research team. This time, they were prepared with both advanced technology and traditional survival knowledge. They established a permanent research station using a combination of alien technology and human techniques. The station became a training center where crews from across the galaxy learned survival skills that had kept humans alive in hostile environments for thousands of years. Jake taught them that technology was a tool, but wisdom and adaptability were the keys to survival. The aliens who had been with Jake on that first mission became instructors at the center. They taught other species about the value of working with natural systems instead of trying to dominate them. Years later, when people told stories about the desert planet mission, they always mentioned how a human engineer had saved his alien crewmates using nothing but knowledge passed down from his grandfather. It became a famous example of why the galaxy needed humans, not for their technology, but for their ability to survive and adapt in any situation. Jake's water traps and survival techniques were adopted by exploration teams throughout the galaxy, and his story inspired a new understanding of what made humans valuable members of the galactic community.